Hey, what's up everyone? Dragging it back in here to tell you that you should be reading Vox Machina Origins. So Vox Machina Origins is a 2018 and ongoing graphic novel series published by Dark Horse, and is essentially the comic book adaptation of the Critical Role Campaign 1 adventuring group Vox Machina. Now I did a recommendation on you should be watching Critical Role, which is a bunch of nerdy-ass voice actors who get together and play Dungeons and Dragons. That's how they describe themselves. It's a great show. It's basically just live-action role play where they get together, they play Dungeons and Dragons, and they act out these characters, and they go on these great adventures. And they're led by Dungeon Master Extraordinaire, Mr. Matthew Mercer. And this is essentially the characters from Campaign 1. And this is kind of like their origin story. Basically, what they call the kind of a little bit of the pre-stream, which is when the stream started, their characters had already been established. The group had already been playing, and this is kind of the story of how their characters kind of got together, how Vox Machina became the group Vox Machina. So it is an origin story, hence the name. And it's kind of cool to see because if you're familiar with the show, you see their dynamic, you see how they work together as a team, as a unit, how they become essentially a family for one another. But it's cool to see how that started. It's a great kind of way of showing a group of people who on their own separately, you would have not have expected them to kind of save the world. And in a fantasy world, you're kind of being depicted as like, these are like normal people. This is a world where we buy into that this is a world of magic and elves and half-elves and Goliaths and gnomes, and we're not supposed to treat this as odd because once you're in this world, the world of Exandria, this is normal. This is commonplace, and the story does a very good job of just kind of putting you on the ground and making you feel like, okay, I'm in this world, so if I see a gnome, that's not a weird thing. If I see a half-elf, that's not a strange thing. Even races that are less common to the average person, like, a Goliath or a Dragonborn, you still know they're there. So when you see like, a 6-foot, 7-foot dragon man, it's like, okay, I might not see them as often, but, I know they're around. And you very quickly kind of just fall into this mode of thinking of this as normal. So then you start being able to go on these adventures with them, start, doing these kinds of stories with them, that you could easily take this story and put it in our world and just, swap out the more fantastical aesthetics of it for real life stuff and have a very similar story. And by doing that kind of story in this, it shows you that these are real people. They feel real because like you, they go through real things. They feel real things. They behave in certain ways. They react to things the way you would. Now, they might be reacting. The equivalent of that thing they're reacting to in this world might be more fantastical, but it's still a fantastical equivalent of something that you could encounter in real life. And as such, when they react in a way that is expectant of how you would react to the equivalent of in your world, they feel more real. You feel more of a connection to them. They don't feel like they're too fantastical or too whimsical, where it's like, yeah, they're elves and they care about elvish things and I can't really relate to it. You see them dealing with real things. You see personalities that, quite frankly, you would probably encounter on a regular basis. You probably know somebody like Vax'ildan. You probably know somebody similar to Grog. I had a drinking buddy once that was like Grog. You might know somebody like Scanlan Sherhall. They feel like real people, despite the fact that most of them, with the exception of Percy, are not humans. They are beings that can only exist within, the works of fantasy, the works of fiction, and yet they feel real to you. And that's like the show. What this series does a very good job of is making something that which should not feel realistic, because it's not. It's all fantasy. It's made up. But it feels real. And that's when science fiction and fantasy are at their best, is when they can feel accessible, especially to people who are perhaps not as familiar with it, not as interested, because not everybody reads Lord of the Rings, not everybody reads Dune, not everybody, reads Stephen King, not everybody reads James Gurney, not everyone is into, this kind of genre storytelling. I mean, I love all these things, so naturally something like Critical Role and Vox Machina Origins, right up my alley, but there are a lot of people who don't come up with this kind of stuff. So and they view kind of genre storytelling as kind of this almost alien thing, no pun intended. And for them, it's like it's hard to get into because I don't understand. I can't relate to people with pointy ears. I can't relate to people who cast spells. You know, I don't. It doesn't feel real to me because doesn't happen in real life. So when you have these kinds of people who can do all these things, who look this way, talking and behaving in ways that feel very, you know, pardon the term, down to earth, suddenly people who normally would have an aversion or feel like this isn't for them find a connection. They find something in this story that they can kind of grasp hold to, and that's what they use to kind of pull them in. Because now I found something quote unquote normal. And from there, it becomes like the gateway. And then suddenly they're taking steps in further and further, and then you introduce them some bit of magic, a bit of fantasy here and there, and suddenly they're getting it bit by bit, and after a while, they're all in. And things that before would have, you know, put them off, now they're accepting as normal because they've bought into the story, they've bought into the world, and now once in this world, they accept that all these things that in our world are unrealistic, in this world they're normal. So someone who can cast magic, that's not a strange thing. The type of magic they might be using, it might be strange depending on what they're doing, but the ability to use magic in this world in Exandria is not strange because it's a world of magic. You know, seeing different races, humanoid races that are, you know, aside from just humans, is no longer a weird thing because they're all around there. And nobody else is acting strange when, you know, a half-elf, you know, pulls up to the bar and orders a drink because, hey, no one else is freaking out. And if I'm buying into this world, if I am a part of this world, then I'm not going to freak out either because I guess this is normal. And you find yourself doing this, honestly, unconsciously. It's not even really a conscious thing you do. You just kind of find yourself being absorbed into the work, into the story. And again, Vox Machina Origins does a very good job of doing that. And again, if you're really a fan of Critical Role, you know these characters. So it's just a wonderful addition to kind of the mythology that, you know, the cast has already set up. But if you're new to it, you maybe heard of Critical Role, you maybe heard of the stream, maybe you checked out an episode here or there, but you're still not sure, maybe you watched my recommendation video. This might be a good way for you to get into it because it's an introduction. You're seeing how these characters got to know each other, how they found each other, kind of how their story began. So when you jump into the stream, you already feel a connection with them. You already kind of understand who they are and where they're coming from, what their motivations are, why one person does this, why one person does that, why someone reacts to this versus the other one reacting to it that way. You're a little bit more familiar because you kind of had this nice you know, kind of bedrock of narrative laid out for you. So depending on who you are and how you like to approach stories, or again, if you're just not as familiar with, again, genre storytelling, being introduced to these characters this way might be the better avenue for you. And then again, from there you can just jump into the stream and really feel like, okay, now I get it. Now I understand. Now I understand why this is so popular and why it's so important to people. So, you know, and if nothing else, it's a great expansion on the mythology of these characters who have, you know, become so beloved to so many of us. You know, who we feel like we know them, we feel like we have a connection with them, and they're not real. None of these characters are real, and yet they feel real to us, and it's because the actors involved do such a great job of bringing them to life, that breathing life into them, that even though we don't see the characters on screen, when you watch the show, for instance, you see the actors doing the voices, yet they sell it so well and you buy into it so much that you can almost close your eyes and see them disappear and their characters appear in front of you. You know, when Travis Willingham does the Grog voice, I can just see Grog, you know, sitting there. I can see this giant man there. Not that Travis Willingham's a tiny man by any means, but I can see a much bigger man even now there. And they do a great job of just embodying these characters. That so to go now read the comic, it feels just like an addition to that, like, you know, an expansion of that. But again, if you're new to it, if you are not familiar with the stream, or again, maybe you've heard of it, but I don't know if I want to get into it, there's so many episodes, do I really want to commit to it? Read Vox Machina Origins. It's a good introduction. It is the introduction to the characters. And from there, see how you feel about it. See, do you like the world? Do you like the setup? Do you like the tone? Do you like the feel? Do you like the aesthetic? And from there, if you do, then I think it's a natural jump to get into Critical Role, the stream. So, with that said, Vox Machina Origins. Have you read it? If so, What do you think? How do you feel it feeds into Critical Role as a whole? If you have not, I will put some links in the description section below. You can check it out, give it a read, come back, give me some of your thoughts. And if you're new to the whole concept of Critical Role and Vox Machina as a whole, let me know what you think. What did you think of these characters? Does it make you want to check out the stream? Because I highly, highly recommend it. I mean, you don't even have to read the comic first. You can jump right into the stream now, and I would highly recommend that. But if you have your reservations, this is a great place to start. It's a good way to kind of get a sense of what it's kind of all about, what the story is, what the world is, and kind of just see if it's your speed. And again, if you like it, there's plenty more for you to dive into. But anyway, that is going to do it for this one. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace!